As the devaluation of the dollar continues and world food supplies are threatened not just by a growing population but a variety of factors, soft commodities such as food continue to rise dramatically in cost. Investments in precious metals are most often extremely speculative, and at the end of the day, gold and silver are substances that you really cannot eat. We all must eat to stay alive, all of us. In that light, we're introducing to this audience a possible investment opportunity involving a company that is focused on the exploration and development of potassium sulfate minerals, otherwise known as potash, used in fertilizer, specifically high-yield potash. That company is IC Potash. IC Potash trades on the TSX Venture Exchange as ICPTF and in the U.S. as ICPTF. IC Potash's Ochoa Project in Lea County, New Mexico, contains premium-priced potash necessary for maintaining sensitive crops such as high-starch potatoes, beans, nuts, fruits including strawberries, citrus, mangoes, cherries, and peaches, etc. Join me now for a conversation with Sidney Himmel, President and CEO of IC Potash, as we begin the education process regarding this resource with ever-increasing demand and a significant project in the land of enchantment, New Mexico. Sidney, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
How far away from production is the Ochoa Project for IC Potash? What's involved?
Essentially, we've got 2 to 2.5 years from now to finish up the environmental impact study, which is the most time-consuming event. We're working on pre-engineering right now. It's called pre-feasibility study. That'll be completed in October. And then from October of this year until the end of the following year, we'll do the entire bankable feasibility study. The bankable feasibility study completes probably 35% of the detailed engineering, but it's a document which is taken to be in sufficient depth that it's bankable, which means you can get project financing from the major international banks which finance operations such as these. Then the whole build period is about a year and a half. Then there's a 9-month lead time because of the production processes. Once you get it going, there's no lead time. Production is continuous, but because of the nature of what we're doing, once everything is built and up and running, it takes 9 months to get the first product out. So we can substantially have good solid product out in 2016 in good volume. And that includes pre-marketing as well.
And how does this compare to other potash companies?
Compared to the other potash projects, and look at them realistically, we're going to be one of the first new potash mines which are out producing. These are large projects, and ours is a smaller project physically, although the profitability is very high. Most of these projects are $2.5–3 billion projects. That does not happen in a couple of years. But ours has got a much more reasonable capital bite, but you still have to do all the engineering and complete the environmental impact statements, etc.
You're priced underneath your peers, but according to Wellington West Capital, they put a buy rating of $2.50 during the next 12 months, and that's very significant in the short term. And then Horst Hoeniken at Stifel Nicholas has you at $2.25, with a potential upside of up to $5 a share.
I would say right now, when you look at our peers mathematically, we are somewhat priced below average. When I say priced, I mean actually where we're trading. We're moving quite strongly, but we're having a bit of a shift from the very early institutional investors towards a broader market in North America. So a number of people have been taking their profits. I would say that if you look at the unique aspect of our product, which is that it's a potash, but it's a premium priced potash, it sells for about 50% higher than regular potash. If you look at the very low cost aspect of our operations, which are projected, which are very low cost compared to the other significant producers in the world, if the market was aware of the depth of our engineering team and the speed with which we're developing it, I think then our valuation would start to excel the competitors. And I'm hoping that that starts to happen over the next 2 or 3 or 4 months. We're starting to get the story out that we're now a development company. We're no longer an exploration company. And I am focusing on getting that story out personally as I travel across North America and also Europe. We've now got a very strong technical team of engineers, mine builders, and mine runners, allowing me to take the time to get the story out. So I think our valuation will exceed the peers. Now, one thing investors need to realize is that, well, a few things. Point number one is that there's a lot of gold and copper companies out there. They're in the thousands. If you look at the potash juniors, there's no more than 20, and I would suggest there's no more than 15. Of those 15 potash juniors, they all have a potential mine, in all likelihood. In fact, it's almost definite that from an engineering perspective, they all have mines. But the question is which mines are going to get built. That's a function of the location That's the function of the specific competitive aspects of those mines. It's a function of the depth of the team, how quickly they can work, and their ability to finance. Over the next 12 to 18 months, of those 15 to 20 companies, and it's probably over the next 12 months really, the market is going to have to determine which ones are actually going to make it or not make it. The ones that don't make it are going to see their value decline significantly because they're not really going to get there. The ones that are going to make it are going to have to see their value increase significantly because in order to fund the kind of capital expenditures which are required, they have to have a much higher market capitalization. I think we're going to be one of those 6 new mines that are actually going to be built, and therefore I believe that our valuation is going to start to recognize that over the next 12 months, and I think it's probably going to start over the next 3 months, over the next quarter.
You mentioned location. The Ochoa Project is in New Mexico, Sidney, not too far from the largest agricultural state in the U.S., California, where fruit such as strawberries are grown as well as other crops that require premium-priced potash. Give us a background on this premium-priced potash and why your resource in New Mexico is so strategically important to agriculture, especially in the U.S.
Well, there's 2 types of potashes. There's actually 3 types of basic fertilizers. There's actually 100 fertilizers, but the basic requirements for crops are nitrogen, which makes the proteins for crops, potassium, which allows plants to stand up and moves their water around, and phosphates, which are needed for their genetic material and also for their structure and for their enzymes and catalysts. If you don't have those 3 fertilizers in there, N, P, and K, plants aren't going to grow. They're going to die, or if they do grow, they're going to have very poor mass and very poor quality. Now we're focusing on potassium. Potassium fertilizers are referred to as potash. Potash is a potassium fertilizer. Potassium is needed for water balance in plants, and obviously if you haven't got water balance in human beings or plants, they're going to die pretty quickly. There's 2 types of potashes really. There's the big potash, which is muriate of potash, which is potassium chloride. Those potashes are very good for the big carbohydrate crops, wheat, oats, barley. Basically, all those crops that make bread, and bread's potassium chloride MOP is good. However, for the especially sensitive crops, and those especially sensitive crops are fruits, vegetables, tobacco, horticultural crops, those are very, very high-yielding crops for the farmers. They produce profits of 10 times of what the other crops produce. Those crops cannot use very well potassium chloride. The chlorides are toxic for those plants. Therefore, those plants need a non-chloride potassium or non-chloride potash, and that's what we're going to be producing, sulfate of potash. Now, because of the high demand for this product, the absolute need by the growers of fruits, vegetables, tobacco, etc., the value-added crops, those farmers make about 10 times as much per acre as the other farmers. They can afford to pay a higher price. Whatever the price is, they have to buy it. For example, recently, even India, who used to subsidize the potassium chloride fertilizers, are now subsidizing the sulfate of potash fertilizers because that country is growing more fruits, vegetables, etc. Now, in most of the world, the way you make potassium sulfate is artificially. It's not a natural mineral. You have to combine MOP, regular potash, with sulfuric acid, and you need a lot of regular MOP. That means the cost is high, because if you need at least 1 ton of MOP plus half a ton of sulfuric acid plus all kinds of other things to make 1 ton of SOP, it's going to be expensive. So the cost curve is very expensive. So you have a situation where the demand is high, the cost is high. In we come. We happen to have a mineral called polyhalite in New Mexico, which has both potassium and sulfate in it. Therefore, we're going to be a profoundly low-cost producer, one of the lowest in the world, and we're going to be able to sell the product at the high cost established by our high-cost competitors.
And you're in the United States, in my old home state of New Mexico.
We're in the United States. We're in southeast New Mexico. That's where the potash industry actually started back in the 1920s. In fact, there was no knowledge of any potash in Canada back then. The New Mexico companies who found subsequently during the 1950s those potash deposits in Saskatchewan. Now, since the 1920s and 30s, you've had ongoing potash mining where we are in southeast New Mexico in Carlsbad, which is where the famous Carlsbad caverns are, and we're just adding to that production. So it's a built-up area. We've got mining capacity there. There's miners there, well-trained labor force. It's a very industrial area. Southeast New Mexico is basically north and west of Texas. These are pioneer states. They love industry. We have the support of the Bureau of Land Management, which is outstanding. And as you mentioned, we're located very, very well because we can ship to California, we can ship to Florida, we can ship to Mexico, which has increasingly taken over a lot of farm production. We'd be shipping out of the Houston port for international distribution, and we're right next to rail lines for domestic distribution. So the thing is positioned exceedingly well, and not surprisingly, given the unique nature of the product, and also given that we're in an area where they've been mining potash and distributing it for almost 90 years.
Give our listeners a brief snapshot into your background, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, I'm 59 years old. I've been around for a while. I've had a number of careers. I started in physical chemistry, so I'm a natural for understanding these processes in the chemical engineering. Over time, I migrated into the financial sector, and during the 80s and 90s, I focused on financing mining companies and junior companies who became senior companies. So I've taken those experiences together and decided to do it myself. We started this company, myself and some financiers. In fact, January 1st, 2008. I've been at this situation now for almost 3.5 years. We've built a massive team. Initially, I was intimately involved with the geology and the technical operations, but now the team is sufficiently deep that I can basically watch what's going on, make sure we're on track. But given my experience in financing companies and providing them with strategic advice for growth, I think I'm trying to use those skills and those relationships that I developed over the years to help move this thing along. Also from a strategic perspective, you need political support from a political perspective, and also, of course, in terms of financing. When you're a company where the left side of the balance sheet is a developing asset, where the right side of the balance sheet is financing, and you have no revenues, but you should have massive revenues, and you will have massive revenues once you've built, you have to be very sophisticated financially to get to that point where it becomes a profoundly high-yielding cash flow EBITDA story. And I think that's sort of the background that I'm using to do that. Any one human being only has a tiny amount of knowledge of what he needs to know. I'm well aware of that. Therefore, I've also added a deep number of consultants and relationships on the financial end of things, both in North America and internationally, and they're doing a fantastic job. So that's sort of my background, and that's how I'm trying to use it to the advantage of the shareholders and the consumers.
We look forward to additional updates from you, Sidney, during the coming months as we continue to tell the unfolding story of IC Potash. Thanks for joining me today on the Ellis Martin Report.
I really enjoyed this interview, and I appreciate the opportunity of speaking to you.
I've been speaking with Sidney Himmel, President and CEO of IC Potash, trading under the symbol ICPTF on the TSX Venture Exchange, or in the U.S. under symbol ICPTF. Their website is icpotash.com, or find IC Potash on potashblog.com. That's potashblog.com. I'm Ellis Martin.